Who's going to join us live. I'm Rebecca. We have our latest installment of lessons from the Leaderboard to Leadership. I'm going to wait as people join us. And as we get notification, we're officially live on LinkedIn. And we are. I think we are. We're good. All right. So welcome everyone to our 12th, 11th. I'm not actually sure how many this is, but it's our latest installment of Lessons from the Leaderboard to Leadership. I'm Rebecca Gebhardt, owner of Rise Up Consulting, where we specialize in helping emerging sales leaders go from the leaderboard to leadership and strengthening sales leadership pipelines at corporations. And I'm so excited today to have an old friend of mine, Sean Rivas, joining me to talk all things sales leadership and his lessons that he has learned in his long tenure of sales leadership. And I want to introduce him in the right way. He has a long resume, which is very impressive. And I'm going to explain anyone who's actually watching the video his beautiful background that he has and why he's got his little special jersey in the background. So Sean has 20 years of sales and sales leadership experience. He started his sales experience as an intern with the Southwestern company, which I think now is called Southwestern Advantage. That is where I also got my start. Cold calling, door-to-door sales all through the summer. And then he moved into sales leadership where he recruited, trained, and managed 34 salespeople as a college student. Then he went over, like I did, we had the same kind of career progression where he then went to Family Heritage as well in 2007, where after a slow start, he says, he finished the year in the top 10% of salespeople, which I think says a lot about his character and not giving up. He moved into leadership in 2009. And in the last 2 years, Sean has led his team to 50% plus growth. And he was recently promoted to agency owner, which is the highest promotion you can get. So it's just a plateau from here, Sean.
It's all downhill.
Yeah, it's all downhill. So currently his role is to facilitate the growth of the agency through recruitment, training, and development of sales leaders. He resides in Athens, Georgia, and he's married to Christy, and they've got 3 beautiful children, Mia, Ava, and Andrew. And behind him, for those of you who are watching the video, he's got that jersey from the University of Georgia because he was a walk-on onto the football team, and he played. And he has in parentheses, I'm supposed to say, go dogs.
That's right. Hey, we're number 1 right now, so we'll see what happens, in the next couple of weeks.
Are they really number 1?
We're trying to ride this wave here. Yeah,
okay.
Number 1.
I went to Marquette University, and our football team is undefeated because we have no football team. We're not ranked. We're just undefeated. Okay.
That's one way to do it. You never get
that's definitely one way to do it.
if you never make a sales call. So.
Yeah, there you go. So Sean, I'm so excited to have you on today and talk. And I'm going to try to keep the inside banter to a minimum because that can happen. When people know each other well, then we can kind of go. So I'm going to try to not go off on tangents. That would be like inside secrets, right? But I'm so excited to have you on today. Can you I just gave that bio, but can you share just real briefly your quick version of your sales to sales leadership progression?
Yeah, so I started off, I'll kind of talk about my family heritage career, but, I feel like it was the same at Southwestern. I got off to a slow start. I wouldn't say I'm like a natural, like gifted natural salesperson. I feel like I've had to work on my craft for sure. And I think that served me well in leadership, but, so got to a slow start, but learned that I am, I do better when I put my confidence in systems and processes and build good habits. I was a perspective junkie growing up, as I was kind of growing up in sales, I remember just constantly, looking towards the people that were in that next phase, just a little bit ahead of me, just for hope, I feel like as leaders, we're, sales leaders, we're hope dealers, but we're also, as growing sales professionals, we have to, look for hope. And I remember actually, Rebecca, following you. You were you were just a little bit ahead of me, in the career. And I know you kind of had to go off to a slow start and then started having a bunch of success. So while I was having that slow start, I was like, hey, look what Rebecca's doing. And that gave me some hope. And then, I think success is always on the other side of failure as long as you keep going and you keep growing. And so there were moments in my career early in my career, where it felt kind of hopeless, but I just kept going. You have to stay in action and then keep growing. You have to have that growth mindset and just always be focused on getting better. And so, pushed through, was able to end up having a solid first year in sales, really my first 2 years, and then moved into leadership and started to build, build an agency, recruit, train, and develop other reps.
You guys can't tell, Sean's very humble. So he's gonna I love your story, Sean, and it is what I appreciate, because you and I had a conversation, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and you were talking about when you would look at how terrible my stats were, and you were like, if Campana, which was my maiden name, if Campana can get through that, but there is, I think we see all of these successes, we see all of these bios, the LinkedIn banners of all this top, we're all successful, and it's almost like people aren't approachable when all they've been has been like excellent and at the top. And I think they're for people like you and I who had slow starts and had to really just keep one foot in front of the other, I think there's a perspective that you have where you can have some empathy for others, but also your journey actually, I think, gives more hope to people than look at the shinies. I mean, everyone has problems. I don't mean to project that top performers or people who are always in the top don't have issues. They do. But I think that it's so important to have sales leaders with different track records at organizations who have different learning curves, because it gives other people hope. And it also, the sales leader then has empathy. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, and your path is your path. I think you have to just take ownership and accept, your journey and your path. And it's easy to get in the comparison trap, but it's also helpful to recognize that your unique journey allows you to lead in a way that only you can uniquely lead. And I think you have to just be grateful for those challenges. And a lot of times those challenges are going to, again, help you have that empathy and help you understand what people are going through when they're going through some of those similar situations. And it's good for me to just remind myself of what it was like, remind myself of those humble beginnings, and so that I can relate and have empathy with new agents and new sales reps.
It's like painful though to put yourself back in there and be like, I think it's like nails on a chalkboard inside of a stomach is how I like talk about having to go back and relive my own trauma of like sales, you know what I mean? My start in sales. And I don't, that's like the only thing I can correlate it to. It just like this gross feeling where you're just nervous. It's in your core. When I get clear on that, I'm like, oh, I know how this person feels. But it's not fun to go back and reflect on that. But when you do, when you pause, you're right, it's much more relatable. So can you share? Oh, sorry. Yep.
Also important to continue to keep getting out of your comfort zone, and to make sure and just to have those little reminders of like, oh yeah, this is what it feels like to be really uncomfortable. And, and again, I think if you get too far away from doing the uncomfortable, then it can hurt you as a leader.
Uh-huh. I'll hold my comments for that. That's an inside story I was about to.
Yeah.
I'm not saying my demise in sales leadership was when I got comfortable. I won't actually admit that on here, but it may be true. Okay, so this whole series is about the lessons from the leaderboard to leadership. Can you talk about going back to how it feels, not just for salespeople, but new sales leaders, what your journey was as a new sales leader? And if you want to talk about the family heritage one. So like from in 2009, when you started building a team.
Well, I think one of the challenges was I still, so I started to have this team and I was supporting the team, but I still really identified as a salesperson. Like I would have like two sets of goals, right? I have like, all right, my personal sales goals. And then I had over here on the side, I kind of had like my team goals. And I still just really identified as a salesperson. And for a really long time, I still prioritized my personal sales goals over what my team was doing and supporting them. And they were just, that was sort of like my side hustle, but my main hustle was my personal sales goals. And so until I finally made that switch mentally and said, hey, you know what? These team goals, me supporting my team, that has to be either just as important or it has to take priority. You're not going to kind of get over that hump. And for me to get over that hump of that transition, I had to like switch my identity, from a sales guy to a sales leader. And I started with prioritizing my team goals, my leadership goals, above, my personal sales goals were still there, but I had to make that switch. Where a lot of times, again, it's just kind of like the team size, like, oh, that's my little side hustle. So I think you have to make that switch. And then the other thing that was a challenge for me when I first moved from, moving into sales leadership was, again, identifying as a salesperson. I kind of, starting to get my groove in sales and started to do some fancy things, like these fancy around the back closes, that worked well for me because I knew exactly when to do them in the right situation and exactly how to do it. And they were really effective if you did it in the right spot, at the right situation, at the right time. But then, I'd have, a new salesperson come and follow me and watch me do that. And they would try to do it and they would do it in the wrong situation at the wrong time. They wouldn't do it correctly and it would completely backfire and explode, in their face. And so I realized that I needed to be more duplicatable. Personalities are not scalable. Systems, processes are scalable. And so I had to be duplicatable and I had to kind of not dumb down, but simplify and get back to the basics with my sales processes as I led, and not teach people super around the back fancy stuff, because it wasn't really duplicatable. It wasn't scalable. It wasn't going to help us grow. And that took, some humility and, kind of get my pride out of the way and saying, hey, again, my leadership, my sales leadership is more important than my personal sales, and doing things that were scalable and duplicatable. I think the analogy I would think of is like Emeril Lagasse.
No, keep going.
Yeah, like so Emeril Lagasse, right? Like he doesn't have to use a recipe. He's just like bam, and he can like, and if you're, he just knows like a little pinch of that, and how that like impacts, how the food's going to taste. And so, but if a new salesperson comes and tries to be like Emeril Lagasse, and they're just like, instead of putting sugar, they're putting salt. Instead of using a crust, they use cardboard. Like, and then they get this bad thing. And so, I think even as you get as an experienced salesperson, if you want to be a sales leader, you still need to use a recipe because that's what your new salespeople need to use, and not be like Emeril Lagasse where you're just kind of like, freestyle chefing.
Right. Or the argument in our house this past week was, can we substitute margarine for butter? In baking, that's sidebar. That was just an argument. But like, I don't know.
There was a difference.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Anyone in Wisconsin from the dairy state is going to be very appalled. Margarine is a swear word for dairy farmers. It's a swear word. Okay.
Just kidding.
But what you said about, but changing your identity, that is an issue. And it's something that we talk about with our clients, but it's so crucial because I call the producing sales leader the forgotten middle child of the sales world. And it is the most difficult position to be in. And this could be in your world where you're selling and then building a team as you're scaling your insurance agency. You have to decide where to go. In other organizations, the sales leader the salesperson already got promoted to sales leadership, but they're still acting and identifying as a salesperson who comes in and saves their team and saves the day, and they're the closer. And so that's really important. And I was on a call this morning with 10 sales leaders talking about goals. And it's funny because a lot of them go, this is my selling goal. And it's like you need to have a team goal as well if you're a leader, which is pretty crucial. And then what you're talking about with these recipes, which is really important. So I always say you treat everyone the same, but you have to coach them differently. And there's a battle, Sean. I don't know if you're like, there's like, don't use a sales talk, use a sales talk. And when I was young, I would be like, every sale, not just the sales talk, they had to say it word for word. But if they didn't do the motions, like if they didn't put their pen and their head down to be assumptive closing, I would like berate them for it, which was so stupid. It's like, but you have to have a loose system that people can use their strengths and go into it. So you should absolutely use your fancy closes if that works for you. Like you should absolutely do that. But then when you're coaching someone, specifying, saying, this is my strength. I could not do a fancy close. I'm not a closer. So I can never, my closes are still awkward to this day. They're still awkward. That's okay. I'm an approacher, right? I can ask good questions. I'm good at discovery. But if you're sitting down with someone, you're training them, be like, I don't know what your strengths are yet. But if you follow this system, you're going to figure out what you're good at. And then you can lean into that and develop that and then get fancy. But it's, you're speaking right. Personality is not duplicatable. You can't one-on-one manage everyone. You have to create systems and processes and then train and develop other people. So,
well, you manage systems and metrics and numbers, but you lead people. There still is this emotional, relational piece to being an effective leader. But again, you manage systems, you manage processes, because those are important too.
Those are important, right? You lead people, and that no one has a greater impact over someone's success than their direct manager, and the relationship with the direct manager has the biggest impact over that success. So there's this battle all the time, like leader versus manager, and I'm like, you need to be both. You need to be a leader, you need to be a manager, and you need to be a coach in sales leadership. It's not, manager is not a 4-letter word, right? It's just, you need both to scale organizations and really grow. So love
Correct.
that. Love that. Okay. So as a senior sales leader, right now, your focus is developing your next tier of sales leaders. So what are a few mindset pieces that you think frontline leaders need to be really successful?
Yeah. So I taught a part on this a couple of years ago. And it was like one of those moments where you're like, somebody teaches you to teach about something that you're not feeling real confident in, and then you teach on it, and then all of a sudden it becomes like your new strength, And so anyway, I remember this, and so the acronym is EOR. Like what was the guy, Winnie the Pooh, EOR. So it's EOR, which apparently somebody told me that's not how you spell EOR.
There's a
So,
Y in there.
but for today's purposes, it's EOR. Okay, that's how we spell it in Georgia. And so the E stands for expect the best. Expect the best. You have to expect the best. I found that if I err on the side of trust, things just go better versus erring on the side of like distrust or this person's slacking off or this person's lying to me or this person. It's better for me to err on the side. I just found that I operate best when I err on the side of trust and assume the best. I expect the best. And that, as leaders, we fail sometimes, or we're bringing a new agent and it doesn't work out as well as we want it to. And so we can't let, again, Winston Churchill says that success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And so you have to go into every situation expecting the best. That is, you develop the salesperson, the sales leader, that they are going to be, you have to go and say, hey, this person is going to be my next superstar. And because we tend to find what we're looking for, and so if that's what you're looking for and that's what you're expecting from your reps, then that's what you're going to get. And so you just have to be careful not to get too cynical when things don't work out well every single time with every rep that you work with. You got to expect the best. So that's the E. The O is ownership mindset. You have to take ownership in the development of your reps, and your leadership development. And yes, obviously they have to take ownership in it too, but that you have to take complete ownership and saying, all right, what are the things that I can do as a leader to help create a well-lit path for them to be successful, and not just be like, well, I kind of checked this box, I checked this box, well, they didn't work out. No, you have to say, okay, I checked those boxes, but could have had some better boxes, could have checked more, don't need some different boxes, you have to always focus on getting better and again having that growth mindset. But again, that starts with ownership. Like, hey, I am responsible for helping this agent or this new sales rep be successful. And then the R is relationship. You know, you have to build those relationships, and those relationships are built, you know, when you tell stories and you get vulnerable. I remember there's a specific story that I tell about that happened in my first 3 months that I tell over and over and over and over again. And that I think helps people relate to you and helps build that relationship. And then you have to ask good questions, you know, to build relationships. You really have to understand your salespeople's why. You know, why are they doing this? What makes them tick? And you know, at some point in time, they're going to ask themselves, why am I doing this? You need to be able to, hey, recall, hey, this is why you're doing it. You know, and so
you're assuming you just lifted that up by a piece of paper, like you were taking notes, reminding you like, well, oh, okay, leaders should also take notes.
well, things go better when you do, or at
Truly.
least when I do. I do better if I take notes. Don't rely on your memory for anything.
Yep, that's really funny. The ER, you know, it's so funny. That's like ER is such a negative character, but it's such a positive acronym. I love it. No, I
Yeah.
love it. So expect the best, assume the best, ownership mindset, and then relationships. Prioritize
Mhm.
relationships.
Yep. For sure.
I love it. We should definitely people should take notes. It's actually we overcomplicate sales leadership a lot of time, right? It's always like there are certain things that move the needle, and if new sales leaders could get good at those things, it's a phenomenal start, right? It's such
Hmm.
a phenomenal start. Um, so with those skills, there's other skills that sales leaders need, and recruiting is one of them. It's we have a crazy job market right now. It's going to be crazy for a while, but sales leaders, one of their top jobs is to recruit great people. So what do you feel are the top things that sales leaders must have to be excellent recruiters?
Well, you need to understand your value add. You need to understand, you know, what makes your career opportunity unique, and what, you know, relative to other opportunities. And so you need to completely understand that. And so a lot of times that starts with figuring out, well, why do people come on board? You know, why do people come work with you? And so I think that's helpful to start asking questions of your existing reps, like, hey, why did you come do this? What attracted you to this? You know, and so we ask that question a lot. And when we interview new agents and new reps, like, hey, why did you come on board? And it's just a good reminder for us to understand, okay, hey, I wanted better, you know, quality of life, better work-life balance, or hey, I wanted, you know, the opportunity for residual income or whatever that is. I mean, obviously you got to figure out your unique, you know, value to whatever your job you're recruiting to, but you need to just understand what people are looking for. What is that pain point? And then again, at the end of the day, it's just, you know, recruiting is sales. I mean, it's just finding needs and filling needs. And so you got to find needs. You got to need to learn to ask really good questions to kind of find those pain points, and then say, hey, well, here's how this career can fill that pain point in recruiting. And then I don't know, this probably goes to your next question, but I think it's really helpful for us to identify. A couple years ago, I finally, like after years of being in business, like put together our core values, and and then we put that in our recruiting video that we send to, you know, all of our potential prospects. We say, hey, here's our core values. This is what we value. And what happened? We started to attract people that had similar core values, and so that was really important and huge for us to identify our core values and then recruit to those core values. And I felt like that made our culture so much stronger. And part of the reason we've had, you know, these back-to-back 50% growth years is that we have such a strong culture. And I think that goes back to, again, recruiting to those core values.
Hmm. I have a call right after this with one of our corporate client sales leadership teams, and we're discussing values, culture, and trust. And we've already
Mhm.
discussed values, and in like when we were talking about recruiting, like having a clear picture of the values of someone you want, the talents and skill sets of someone you want, what makes someone succeed and fail, in the sales role, what makes someone succeed and fail in the sales leadership role. But I love what you said about the value add and making the career unique, and like your value proposition, and why. There are so many differences when I'm working with emerging leaders. Like, recruiting is not selling, but it is selling. But it's not, right? But there are some things you cannot bring into sales leadership. You need to leave in sales. But this is one that's very similar. So just like great salespeople ask good questions and they know the value add of their product or service, great recruiters also fill that need. It's not more complicated than that. But sometimes the thing, most people see that, Sean, but I think the problem when I'm working with sales leaders is they go, I didn't know that was my job in the recruiting process. Like, they didn't, do you know what I mean? Like, they were like, I just thought I'm asking questions to see if they could do a good job. And it's really like the value prop is leadership, and the value prop is the culture. So the fact that you sat down and really thought through your values, and I did this with a leadership team, I don't know, 2 years ago. It took a long time for them to narrow down their top 5 values. I mean, you could have up to 7. Up to 7's probably the max values. 3 on the very low end when you're really thinking about this. But in sales, if you have different values, it can feel like you have no values. You know what I mean? Like, if someone values performance above all else, performance is a great value. But if you don't also value integrity, well, you could see where there's some issues going to come up. So what are your top values? What were some of them you narrowed down?
Yeah, so teamwork, just a healthy form of, competition. So teamwork, fun, integrity was huge for us. Growth, and how many is that? 4? I'm missing one. Oh,
So this is
service. Service.
service.
Like,
Okay, I'm
service-minded.
laughing. I put you on the spot on purpose because most people put their values together and then they have no idea what they are. And
Yeah.
this is recorded live, so you're like, the fact that you were like, so bump, ba-dump, 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 and it took you 30 seconds to remember. That's phenomenal. You guys, if you are looking to interview, you need to ask people what their values are. And if they don't know, if they didn't answer like Sean did, I would run. I would run really quickly on what they don't know, because it's, do we plaster them on a wall somewhere, or do we actually live them and remember them and talk about them? So
That's right.
this leads into your culture. We have a whole process at Rise Up Consulting to do this, but I wanted you to speak about culture because I know how fun your team, how much fun they have. Like, we're friends on Facebook too. I see all the pictures you post. It's so freaking fun. And you've been really intentional about building it. So what do you feel, and a culture is a huge competitive, it's like the only competitive advantage small to mid-sized companies have, right? It's like, there are certain things you just can't compete with. Culture is one you have total control over. So what do you feel are important components? I mean, values are, but components of a strong culture, and how do you build that at the Revis agency?
Yeah, it's like one of those quadrant 4 activities. It's like not urgent, but super important. And so sometimes it feels like, oh man, we're getting all our team together and just spending all this money on this event, or you're taking people out of the field to do something fun. And you're like, oh, you have to be intentional about it, And so we kind of made a point to say, all right, this is important. This is critically important in the moment. We sometimes feel like we take a step back. We just had a big Christmas dinner last night, and got the bill, and I was like, oof, but like, all right, I have to remember, okay, this was important. You know what I mean? This was
You're the
important.
boss now, so you can't hand that off anymore. You actually
Oh
had to
yeah,
sign it, didn't you?
I did. Christy was making fun of me. She was like, she saw me look at the check a few times. Huh. But I had to remind myself, like, all right, this is important. Why did I just spend this huge dollar amount on this Christmas dinner? Well, yeah, because that's important. So to the relationships, the conversation, it's like people leave the business, but it's hard to leave a family, And so I think that's important. So you need to have a rhythm. Part of your rhythm and part of your system has to be about building culture and getting your agents together, especially if you lead a team where everybody's remote, and sales can be a lonely business. And so if you have to be intentional about it. Otherwise, you can have all these rogue salespeople just doing their own thing. So that's, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to be intentional. You got to create that space for people to get to love each other and know each other and start encouraging each other. And it's again, core values. People have to. What is it? The old saying, like, people don't care how much you
How
know
much you
until
know
they
until
know
they
how
know how
much you.
much you
There
care.
you go.
Yep.
And so that just needs to be genuine as part of the way you lead.
Yep. I'm glad you guys were on purpose pausing about that. And you didn't just like, here's our values, here's our culture, and then never talk about it. It's easy to sit and define it. It's simple to define it. I'll say that. It's not easy to
Hmm.
actually take the time, but to get in the rhythm, as you said, and to be intentional about this is how we live it. Here's how we invest in it. We know that it's going to be good for our people. And the reality is, if someone has one friend at work, if they align with values, they're going to be less likely to leave. And I know that you have turnover just like other people have turnover, but the intentional cultures increase engagement and that increases revenue. So it's a super, super important thing. So I appreciate you being on here with me today. Speaking of culture and hiring, I know that you're hiring. So would you
Hmm.
like to just share real quick? I know you're in Georgia, but you kind of work with people all over. So just share a little bit of what you're looking for and then where people can contact you.
Well, you heard our core values, so we're looking for people that that align with those core values. And so we found that there's like this sweet spot of this person that has like super competitive drive. Like we have a lot of former athletes that work with us and that have that like competitive drive. Like they like the fact that there's a scoreboard, but then you combine that with the heart of service. And so we also have a lot of people that work with us that have come from the ministry, and so if you're somebody that has that competitive drive, but you also have that heart for people and a heart server. We found that makes a great rep with us, and a great leader with us. So that's the type of person that we're looking for.
Okay. So if anyone is watching this and they're like, that sounds like me, you can get a hold of Sean. He is tagged here, and I will add your information, Sean, in a comment so people can contact you. But it was so lovely to have you on. It was good to talk about all of this stuff. I will be sharing some of your takeaways with our email list. So if people aren't on that, you can contact us. But I can see why you've had all the success you've had and your intentionality of putting one foot in front of the other. So thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate your leadership.